Well, the next brother, he's Graeme Reed, and he's from Anichinaabe. He's a mix, Anichinaabe and European descent. He works at the Assembly of First Nations, leading their involvement in federal and international climate policy, including recently as co-chair of the International Indigenous People Forum on Climate Change at COP25. In his free time, he is completing a PhD at the University of Gale, studying the intersection of indigenous governance, environmental governance, and the climate crisis. Thank you to be here, Ghazali.
Hey, Graeme, how you doing? Thank you so much. I know it's very early over there. Cool. So let's start real quick, so that you can get your cup of coffee again. What's have you changed your mind about in the last 100 days? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and thanks for this opportunity, Ghazali. It's an honor to be even included in this kind of roster of people. And don't worry, I've been drinking enough coffee already to feel good in this. Yeah, I guess my, in reflecting on this question, I think two things. One was just really over the last 100 days, I think I was kind of reaffirming my belief that the work that we do in the climate sphere is actually the exact same thing that we do when dealing with any other kind of structural inequality. And by that, I mean, climate just exacerbates and magnifies, existing challenges that we all face, mostly because of colonization. And similarly, like I see the health pandemic and Tania's points were a perfect example of that, how this just kind of, further accelerates the things that we're already struggling for. And I think, what I've been trying to do or reflecting on the last 100 days is think about what we can do inwardly. And I've been feeling a lot of frustration and engaging in these kind of multilateral processes. And I love the points that Kenneth and Claire were raising about how do we support the Indigenous movement internationally, and focus on the kind of persistence and relationality between all of our different relatives. So I'm keen on pursuing that more, and I think spaces like this are important representations of that.
And I think like you being a co-chair of the Indigenous Caucus under IIPFCC, at least this is what I did. I just tried things, like a little bit of tasting here and there. See what works, see what does not work. I had some difficulties. Let me pick your brain a little bit. How do you create consensus as a chair dealing with the 7 regions? Do you have a checklist? What questions do you ask yourself maybe before making any, or not making, but proposing a decision or in a meeting? Yeah.
I mean, I think I think the point that Kenneth was talking about, just about the starting point, and I think the starting point is that we're all relatives fighting for the same thing, and that we might have differing opinions on how to do that, but kind of by acknowledging that our outcome is shared, I think there's an ability to figure out and discuss what are the ways to deal that, and recognizing that there is diversity. I think you kind of alluded to it. I think the role of the chair is often to kind of stand with or stand behind folks. And that kind of, for me, feels like, really I'm just trying to create the space for dialogue between regions, and the dialogue between regions requires work. It requires building relationships with people. It requires kind of ongoing check-ins outside of main meetings to make sure that folks can air what they have at the top of their mind, and also just acknowledging that there are differing personalities and ways to communicate the things that they feel, and opening up space for that is really important. And so I guess those are kind of check-ins and making sure that everybody's had the ability to share what's important to them, and then thinking about something that's joint is challenging.
Like for full disclosure, so people know, within the UNFCCC, we only have 1 hour in the morning to be able to coordinate with one another, which is very challenging, to be able to listen to all the voices. How do you deal with it, and like how do you try to facilitate all that in 1 hour?
Yeah, very difficultly. But I mean, I think recognizing that it is an hour is just a way to kind of scope and prioritize what people are sharing, and make sure that what we do is we essentially set out those other processes for things to get in more detail. And so I think of the 1 hour as more of just like an overview sharing type of circle, and then the kind of substantive work occurs throughout the day in smaller groups, and then we bring it back. And so it's just about kind of understanding that cycle of kind of work, report back in, kind of accountability that I think the caucus looks for in these sorts of forums. All
right, let's talk a little bit about like perspective and perception of a caucus. I asked this to Carson when he was as a youth chair. Biggest misconception, myths, or something that you would like to talk about, how easy or hard it is, not probably how hard it is, to lead a caucus.
Yeah, I think the misconception is that you actually lead a caucus, and like I don't necessarily see that as the role. Like it's really about like how do you coordinate, facilitate, and empower people to do the things that they want to do. And I think everybody comes to these spaces to articulate a concern that they have back home, to call on more action. And then I see the role of kind of a co-chair as just like opening up the space to do that, and kind of figuring out where and how we can position people in those places of conversation, instead of like really taking space and speaking on behalf. And so I've tried really hard to not do that, and tried really hard to get our youth involved, get our elders involved, and draw on their knowledge and experiences, and allow them to share. I do think like one of the misconceptions in any sort of characterization of a caucus is that like there's an assumed uniformity. It's like everybody, because we're Indigenous, has the same perspectives. And I think like it's really important to kind of counteract that. The UN, there's 7 regions, each of which have their own kind of self-determination process, even within regions. And we heard with Claire, even within what's currently known as Canada, within First Nations, there's a massive diversity of perspectives. And so giving space for that, I think requires, agreeing on those kind of minimum standard principles, and then allowing people to elaborate based on the context that they're entering that space in.
Yeah, because like a caucus is like a UN actually within a UN. At least that's how my perspective is. Yeah, like it is nothing different than a COP or a General Assembly, and you're at the helm of it to facilitate, not to dictate, of course. Thank you so much, because like there is perspective out there that like as a caucus leader or like in a leadership role, you have to like dictate. And I'm very glad that yourself and Carson and many other, definitely the youth, they see differently, as in like it is about to facilitate the decision-making process. Thank you to elaborate more on that. You elaborated on that. How much at COPs or SBs, so that in the intersessional meetings, how much of your time as a chair is spent on conferences and meetings versus making appearances and attending social things like receptions? During COPs, for example.
Yeah, I think my preference is to be doing the work, and I think like Kenneth's point about just grinding it out, is kind of what I feel is one of the roles of the chair is to like do that work so that folks can take advantage of whatever materializes from that. And often there are some benefits that are associated with like building social relationships with other parties and other actors. But I think that comes after, in my mind, after like doing the work and attending the conferences and the meetings and, being in the hallways with folks and talking about why and how states take certain positions and really trying to understand and build that relationship in a positive way. And then spending the time actually doing the work, organizing the different opportunities and really getting our voice out there. And I think that's one thing that at COP25, like our comms folks, Kera and Janine and Lindsay and others like did a really, really wicked job is like taking up that space in a system that is like quite traumatic to Indigenous peoples. And Claire kind of spoke about, this system is built on the erasure of our nations. And so like every act of resilience and resurgence that we have in these spaces, I think is extremely important. And, trying to make space for that is really, really important and was well done at COP25.
Thanks, Graeme. We're running out of time. So maybe anything, I've been asking like everyone this single question, but it gives you a little bit more space to jam, like to talk a little bit. Anything that we did not touch upon that you really want to talk about or want other Indigenous peoples to think about? Anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I'd love to think about more like convening our own climate COP. And we had spoken about that a couple times in the last, 2 or 3 years. And it kind of comes back to your original question, like what has changed? And I really think like part of what's changed is the recognition that, we need to create our own space. And one of those things, and Frank talks about kind of these indigenously determined contributions, like how do we do that and then invite others into that? And I think there's a really important kind of power dynamic associated with doing that. And so, I'd be really keen to work with folks to think about what that looks like and how do we bring all those different movements together to strategize, to coordinate, and to do our own things. Like I think that's something that's really important for us and for the Indigenous movement writ large, is that we retain the integrity of our voice when we create the space, and want to do that.
Yes, definitely. And Frank will be in 2 episodes from now, and definitely going to talk about the IDC's individually determined contributions. We're talking about Frank, so that's Frank Adwagishik. Also like I would say like a rock star. He's amazing in his the way he talks, the way he interacts with youth, with people like Graeme, myself, and as well as the diplomats and the negotiators that I want to talk to. Thank you so much, Graeme. As always, your beard game is on point, and your hair game as well. Thank you so much.
I just got cut. Yeah. Yeah. Miigwech Ghazali for opening up this space, and like look forward to the rest of the episodes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Graeme. Hoka, thank you so much as well for doing the last part with Tania. Who's next, Hoka?